And I love being a Lutheran pastor. I love being a Lutheran pastor in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. I love bringing God's word and sacrament to people in desperate need of his mercy and grace. I love getting to cast vision and to see the body of Christ come alive to equip the saints for love and good deeds. And that's why I wrote Confessing Jesus' Mission. I would love for more of our leaders, those that are paid and non paid, to say, hey, this is a big time. This is a pivotal time for us in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, and we must unite. We must get after it. And we've got to have the difficult conversations that are so, so needed, but we must have them in a way that looks and sounds and feels like Jesus, that we disagree agreeably, that we unite in our confession, and that we move forward in our mission to make Jesus known. I believe we can do that. That's why the book was written. So we have 40 copies, and they're going to go really, really fast. And I'll sign these, I'll personalize all of these. But more than that, for these 40 copies, we'd love to invite each one of you into a private conversation with me. It's going to be a Zoom call on February 23rd. We're going to talk about the state of the LCMS. This is not going to be used for content. It's going to be super confidential, but we're going to grow together. We're going to listen to one another. We're going to care for one another, and we're going to unite in mission in this time together. So if you pick up a copy right now, again, I'm going to sign it. They're going to go very, very quick. Would love for you to pick one up on Amazon. They go live on February 2nd, but you can just reach out to us at uniteleadership.org and we'll get you one of those 40 signed copies. Can't wait to spend time with you. It's going to be amazing to see what Jesus does through this book. And it's a book that is meant not to just sit on the shelf, but to lead a movement of transformation, especially around having difficult conversations agreeably as we unite to confess Jesus as Lord. Can't wait to hang out with you on February 23rd. Pick up your signed copy today. Welcome to Tim Ahlman Podcast. Pray the love and light of Christ is yours as we get to hang out today with a second-time guest. Gabe Kasper is in the house. Let me tell you about him. Lead pastor at University Lutheran Chapel in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Prior to his current role, he spent 5 years as a church planter in Austin, Texas. His passion for preaching and teaching has led him to speak across the country on a variety of theological, philosophical, and cultural topics. We're going to be going into some of those today. He has an MDiv from Concordia Seminary, St. Louis, and a master in philosophy from Eastern Michigan University. In the spare time, Gabe enjoys soccer, reading books, listening to punk rock, and cheering on his beloved Green Bay Packers, who are doing all right. And they just
We're
won the
doing all
other
right
night.
right now, man.
That was all right. Yeah, he and his wife Melissa, they have three little ones. So good. How you doing, Gabe? Thanks for hanging out.
Dude, I'm doing wonderful. Thanks so much for having me, Tim. It's great to be back with you, brother.
So this is going to be fun. Before we hit play, you started talking about, I brought up John Maxwell writing 90 books. And then I said, Gabe, you like to write. Are you writing a book? And you said, in matter of fact, I am. So tell us about your book and what's it going to be about?
Yeah, absolutely. Tentative title, we'll kind of have to workshop it a bit more, but to get at the idea is I'm calling it Finding Home, an invitation to religious spirituality. And the basic idea is this, and we'll probably touch on this a little bit, but we live in an age in which there's plenty of people who would see themselves as sort of spiritual but not religious, right? There's SBNRs, the shorthand for that is a very common thing. And, on the one hand, I want to affirm the sort of spiritual instinct that exists in people and recognize that, yeah, we are made for God and we are searching for that which is beyond us. But when that's done, just kind of my own making, we of course just end up with this sort of deified version of the self. And it's really actually not good. So that's where I think actually something like religion, and of course, for me, it's the Christian religion, I think functions as a way in which our sort of yearning for the spiritual finds itself rooted in something that can actually sustain it. So my language kind of is spirituality is like liquid, it's like water, and religion is like the container, it's like a cup. And so, people are spiritual, not religious. And then Tim, you and I, as dudes who've been in the church for a long time, we know plenty of people who are religious but not spiritual. And so if you're religious but not spiritual, you're like an empty cup. If you're spiritual but not religious, it's just like water spilling out all over the place. To me, I think the invitation, like where our soul finds rest, where our soul is at peace and at home, is when the spiritual is found within the religious, found within these greater teachings, these greater traditions that are beyond us. And then, of course, in particular, Christianity.
Oh, that's so good, dude. That's a helpful metaphor, I think.
Is that helpful? Thank you. I hope so.
The container. So. Yeah, that'll teach. Go deeper. How do you define spirituality and then religion?
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm like, that's, I told you, like, I'm working on this book. My goal is to have my first draft written by I turn 40 in, like, 3 weeks. My goal is to have the draft done by my 40th birthday, and I have, like, the first chapter written. So, we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But yeah, so what do I mean by those 2 things? So, spirituality, I would put it that almost at the personal level and, to use a sort of philosophic jargony term, the phenomenological experience of transcendence, right? So it's that moment of awe, for my Arizona friends, looking at the Grand Canyon, right? It's like, or for us in the Great Lakes, like looking across Lake Michigan, those sort of moments where you are beyond yourself and then leaning into that as we do that maybe in prayer or in studying the scriptures or whatever. That's what I'd say is like a person's spirituality. But those moments, like, it's in those moments we realize that, like, our souls aren't big enough to contain it. Like, we got to go somewhere with these sort of moments. And so that's where I think religion comes into play. That's where I think it comes into play, like, broadly. Say anyone who's religious tends to channel those things into maybe any of the world religions. But then I think, of course, Christianity is the one that it's made for, in that we can turn that spirituality and say, like, oh man, here's one. C.S. Lewis has this story where he's speaking to, like, that's like a group of army officials, and this guy says to him, listen, Professor Lewis, don't come and talk to me about theology and stuff. I have been out in the desert by myself at night. Like, I know there's a God. I know what it is to know who God is. And Lewis says, like, yeah, that's great. He's like, but essentially what you're saying is, like, I know the ocean because I've been to the beach. And he's like, that's true. But if you want to get to America, you need a map of the ocean. And religion is essentially, and in particular Christianity, is the map of the ocean that helps us channel that spirituality into, I think, who we're truly made to be in Christ.
That's so good. Why why is Christianity the container, dude? Why is it solely the Christian movement? What do you say to folks who are open,
Yeah.
and how dare we as Christians claim a stake on truth, stake a claim on truth? So what do you say to that person? Why is Christianity the container?
Yeah, I think that's a big question. I think there's a lot of reasons. One, there's a way in which it's the right way to frame this. It is personal enough yet transcendent enough that it does everything, right? So maybe I'll do this. So the German philosopher Hegel, he says when you think about religion, we can kind of look at it throughout its different sort of historical epochs, right? And so the first historical epoch of religion he refers to as nature religion. And he says you can tell what a religion believes by looking at its architecture. Okay. So he says nature religion, the sort of fundamental piece of architecture for that is the pyramid. And so he says, when you approach God by looking at the pyramid, what does this tell you about God? Well, is the pyramid really inviting you in? No, it's not. Like, it's closed off. Like, yeah, there's technically a door, but it's pretty hard to find, right? So it's closed off. What's it doing is it's pointing you up to the beyond, to that which you can't reach. So it's utterly transcendent, but utterly unreachable. And so the gods are kind of scary in these big forces of nature, right? And then he says the next phase of religion is what he calls art religion. And this is kind of the Greco-Roman era, right? And so how does religion work then? He says, think of a Grecian temple. And how do those work? You have the big pillars, but it's open and spacious. And what are the gods during this time? They're just slightly bigger human beings. That's it. And so the gods are very accessible. They're not scary like they were in the nature religions. They're much more accessible, but they're super finicky. They're not reliable. They're not trustworthy. They're not dependable. And so you move in and out like you do between the pillars, right? And then he says, what's the third and sort of final form of religion? And it's what he calls revealed religion. And the piece of architecture he picks for this is a cathedral. And he says, now think about a cathedral. Does it invite you in? Yeah, absolutely. It's got these big doors that swing open for people to come in. But does it also point you to the transcendent? Of course, it has the steeple that points up high, right? And then when you come inside, what sort of God do you encounter? You don't encounter a God who is bigger. I mean, God, of course, is bigger than you, but you don't encounter a God who is this big, finicky, who's just as, like, annoying as human beings are. You find a God on a cross. You find the God who meets you in your weakness, who meets you in your brokenness. So Christianity has all the transcendence, all the majesty, all the glory of nature religion, and yet all the humanity, all the immanence, all the personalness of art religion. And it combines those two in Christ. And I'm like, dude, of course that's it. Like, that's what we're made for, man.
Dude, that was so good.
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even have, yeah, you're brilliant.
Sorry. Yeah, that was a long answer.
You read a lot. No, it needs to be
I try.
long and comprehensive. The audacity let's go to the sacraments here. The audacity that Christ went to the cross, and then this personal God comes personally to me in water and the word, just bread and wine, his very body and blood, to forgive me, to make me whole, and invite me into the story of his redemptive love, because I'm his bride, I'm his beloved, and give me a meaning and purpose, and a passion to live a very different life by the Spirit's power, a life that's filled with sacrifice and service under the model, under the example of Jesus Christ, the one who washed feet, the one who went to a cross, the one who gave his life away, the one who poured himself into 12 over 3 years so they could pour themselves out to the world, and we're the beneficiaries of this radical movement of love. There is nothing like the Christian story in any other world religion story, because it takes man off. We've always known it had to be about a God. Like I've hardly interacted with any atheist, dude. Like, people
Yep.
understand there is something beyond,
There's something.
and
Yeah.
we're just here to tell you, this is Mars Hill, the revealed God.
Yeah.
I see you're
That's right.
worshiping many gods. Let's talk about the shift from institutional religion. This is where we kind of left off on our last chat, Gabe. Go
Yeah.
deep into the shift right now culturally from institutional religion into intuitional religion. That's very, very fascinating. Let's go there.
Yeah, and actually, this ties in well, which is fantastic. So, if you don't mind, continuing with the sort of Hegel and architecture being indicative of a given religion, what might we say is the architecture that's indicative of our contemporary religious age, at least in our slice of the world? And I would argue it's the mall, right? And so religion sort of then functionally becomes a sort of commodity that I can put on and take off. It's like, dude, you may be an Android guy, and this person may be a Mac guy, and you may be a Christian, you may be a Buddhist, and you conversely may mix and match those things, right? And so that's actually, and interestingly enough, malls are dying, right? So like there's a piece to this as well that I think factors in here. So that's sort of one way of thinking about the shift from institutional to intuitional. The other piece, and it's language I'm borrowing from the scholar Tara Isabella Burton, who her book Strange Rites is, I don't know, probably top 5 most important book I've read in the last 3 years. For anyone keeping score at home, I maybe referenced it in the last episode, I can't remember, but I love it very much, super helpful. But to give her credit, this is kind of her language of it's, we're all aware, at least you and I, Tim, in our world, of the rise of the nuns, NONESs. And she tries to say, like, okay, well, what do we mean when we say this? Like, who actually are these people? And so that's where she drills down into, and the language she uses, because the reality is, like, everyone is religious. Like that's inescapable. We just are. And so instead of calling them non-religious, she calls them religiously remixed. So that's her language. And she says they're remixed where they may take a bit of sort of Buddhist meditative practices and maybe sort of the community from an Episcopalian church, and then maybe the idea of pilgrimage from Islam, right? And sort of combine these things in a way that makes sense to their heart. A quick anecdote towards the sort of shift towards intuitional versus institutional religion. So very interesting. I pastor on campus at the University of Michigan, and recently they actually opened an office. Very cool. The religious, secular, and spiritual life of U of M. I've been here for 8 years. They've never had anything like that. This is an official part of the university for religious Yeah, very interesting. And so they're doing all these, like, I don't know, test groups, and like trying to figure out how to do this thing. And they have a couple of students from my ministry who are part of it. And I'm like, my students were explaining to me yesterday, like, what they were doing as part of this thing. I'm like, dude, are you guys part of a cult? Like this, they're like, and so they're doing just like mindfulness, just like meditating. Like, it's not anything too weird. I mean, it could get weird, but it's not yet.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and that's why I was like, dude, I'm going to look out for this. But they're saying, they have these assignments they have to do and then report back to this group. And a lot of the assignments are like, carve out your own rituals, carve out your own traditions, carve out your own spirituality. That's the language they're using for all of these students that are doing this like thing. And my students were like, dude, isn't this sort of isn't this like sort of like not actually how it's supposed to work? Like, aren't I just using this to like self-serve? And I'm like, yes, this is the whole problem. So yeah, so I mean, to me, like, that's just an example of that sort of intuitional religion at work in our world. Yeah.
Have you seen the show Nobody Wants This? Have you seen this on Netflix?
Dude, I am familiar with it, but I've not seen it. That's with like
Okay.
the dude's the rabbi, and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, and he falls in love with
Right.
this young lady who's, very, very much a NONES, no religious association, and then they're trying to do this dance. He really wants her to become an Orthodox Jew, and season well, now I'm going to spoil it for people that want to watch it. It's remarkable for a couple. They're super short episodes. My wife gets frustrated because they're super short episodes. The acting is and the writing is hilarious. Really, really
Nice.
laugh out loud funny. But season 2 closes. Well, I'll just say it. No one listen. Very few people listen. But now you got to go watch this. You should watch all of it with her kind of saying, "Okay, I'm going to convert," because conversion to her is nothing other than an experience of the divine. So I'm not really like going to go into all the rituals, but it kind of is this mix. I don't have to leave behind a number of my other things. It's just an experience. And so I'm going to experience the transcendence as I go to celebrate Shabbat. And then I'm going to experience the transcendence in the rituals that I create out in the world, even though the rituals it's kind of funny. She gets in. I really didn't really have any kind of rhythms or rituals in my previous life, So anything to add on to that? That's kind of what folks kind of coming into the church, but then we don't need.
You're there. Yeah, that's exactly it. Well, and it's interesting. A thinker I really like a lot, Byung-Chul Han, who's this Korean-born, Berlin-based philosopher. He has a book called "On the Disappearance of Ritual," and he says ritual creates community without communication, which is pretty fascinating to think about, right? So I actually tried this out. I brought this up because I'm insufferable to my interns yesterday, and I just sort of mimed doing the Lord's Supper, doing I didn't say the words of institution. I just pretended I was administering the Lord's Supper. I was like, "Hey, what did I just do?" And they're like, "Oh, you instituted the Lord's Supper, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And so just think about that. That's a ritual that works because we all get it. There's context where I could do that and be like, "What are you doing?" But this is a thing that actually, without me saying a word, united us together as a people. That there's actually that ritual alone has this sort of power that brings us together. And so then, and that's what, in a good way, institutional religion brings us, are these things that are beyond us, that are pre-established, that we can lean into, that we can tap into, versus, from the show you were referencing, the sort of intuitional personal religion. Ritual doesn't actually work that way. If I'm just making it up, maybe it's a helpful habit that helps me towards some other objective, but ritual has to be tied into the thing itself. It is the thing, right? So yeah. And then I think, though, the plus side, Tim, is we are seeing a shift, and I'm sure you've seen these numbers, seen these reports of Gen Z in particular kind of returning to church in larger numbers. It's awesome. And a lot of it, though, is, and not a lot, there's a not insignificant percentage that's finding it attracted to these more established rituals, these more established traditions, right? And so there's, I think, a certain power to those things right now. Yeah.
There definitely is. We're baptizing this upcoming Sunday. A young man that is 21, his mom brought him to church. She'd been long since gone from church, and now he's been with us for a month, engaging in the rituals, the liturgy. And what's to prevent me from being baptized? Nothing. So we have these rituals of every quarter. We have these We Are Family Day, and we celebrate baptisms, young and old. If you've not been baptized, this is your Sunday. It's pretty exciting. I do believe that Gen Z is in the midst of a type of revival. And will they find our churches hospitable, friendly, kind, accessible, and not compromising on a number of the rituals and the liturgy for we as Lutherans? And this goes back, I think, to our Catholic roots. Why did the liturgy Sundays, Resurrection Day, we're practicing celebrating the tomb being empty, and then we're orienting ourselves around the entire narrative of Scripture. The best part of our liturgy is it tells the story of God's love for us in Christ. And what are your thoughts regarding, because this is my podcast, not Lead Time, so we don't talk too many political things. But right now, I think we're struggling with diverse context, and therefore diverse, and yet at their core, very, very similar liturgies in the LCMS. Yeah. And when I say that, I mean rituals. And some are trying to differentiate themselves on either end of the spectrum. And really, it goes to more freedom and more continuity. And I think we as Lutherans, it's maximum freedom, but we don't use our freedom for the sake of ourselves. We use our freedom for the sake of loving our neighbor. And it's just kind of messy in this day and age. I think we ought to embrace the fact that we have this historic ritual tradition, our liturgies, and I think there should be a little bit more agreement about what some of those rituals are, and like that list should be very short, but I think we need to get together and name what it means to be, because the Lutheran identity conversation is going to be huge heading into the upcoming convention. So yeah, let's talk about what's
Yeah.
your take on LCMS liturgy
Yeah.
and rituals and agreement and unity around those things, because it's still very present in our conversations, Gabe.
Yeah, it really is, which is, I mean, in some sense wild to me, but in another sense, I guess I get it. Like we obviously hold rituals to be sacred. That's kind of by definition what they are. And so there's a reason these become important conversations. So, I mean, a couple things. Maybe I'll start with kind of my own approach to it. One of the things I tell folks at our church as they join our church or as they worship with us, my goal is if you come from a place where like you really love like super traditional. Well, one of the things I also like to, and you did a great job, Tim. I like to clarify people's language. Is sometimes people be like, "I'm liturgical." As we say, everyone's liturgical, man. We're all it does like we're all liturgical. What kind of liturgical are you? So then I get off my high horse. All right, and then so if you come from a more traditional background, or maybe you just prefer more traditional style of worship, and that's like where you connect with God, cool. If you come from a more contemporary background, or that's where you more connect with God, cool. I tell folks like whatever way you're coming from, my goal in our worship at ULC is to offend no one by offending everyone. To essentially be the South Park of worship, right? Like it's like those guys are so good at offending absolutely everyone. You can like love whoever they're dunking on, and then they'll turn around and dunk on you, and you're like, all right, I had it coming, you know. So, and I think it's the same thing, because I think we actually just need both. And I'm actually not even talking about blended. Like again, for what it's worth, we have a traditional gathering at 8 a.m. at my church that's straight out of the hymnal, and then I do 2 contemporary gatherings, 9:45, 11:30. It's like probably pretty common, probably somewhat similar to your church, right? And it's fine. And where's it going with that? Oh, here's why I think we need both. Like we just have to. When I was in on vicarage, I went to visit a shut-in every month who was in this like really rundown, sort of decrepit nursing home in inner city Minneapolis. And I go, and it was like not well taken care of, smelled like stale urine, like not good. And I go in, and this guy had really bad dementia. Every time I'd see him, he'd reintroduce himself to me, ask who I was. He had pictures of his family, you know, around his little room, and he couldn't tell me who any of them were. And it was sad, but I'd go and see him, and I'd remind him I'm here from the church, da da da. And then I'd say, "Hey, would you want to do communion?" And he'd say, "Yes." And then I'd say, "Well, hey, let's pray the Lord's Prayer, but before we do that." Every word, man, like without missing a beat, could say the whole thing, right? Be like, "Hey, let's confess our faith with the Apostles' Creed." Every word, like he doesn't have anything in front of him, like just locked in, right? And so there's a way in which like being tied into this tradition that he had his whole life, that even in the midst of his faculties, like it embedded itself deeply in him, right? And so I think there's a lot of power in that. So even within our quote unquote contemporary gathering, we maintain a lot of these important, like I think, traditions that just sort of shape us because it's just what Christians do. And then on the other side of that, we all know, like you've had to have experienced, I don't care who you are, like a sort of hollow traditionalism where it just feels like there's not life. And I think that's the opportunity that the contemporary worship, contemporary styles of worship have an opportunity to kind of speak a fresh word to things that the church has been doing forever. And so I want to lean into those things as well. So then how all that ties into Lutheran identity, that's where I'm with you in terms of like, dude, I don't know. The list seems pretty short to me. And I think tying it into Christian freedom, as you have, like, this is Luther's whole thing. Like, the Christian is simultaneously, you know, Lord of all, subject to none, and simultaneously servant of all, subject to all, right? And like, so we just walk in that, where I want to serve people through how we worship. And I want our identity to be one fundamentally of service. And so, I mean, yeah, that's going to include like doing Christian stuff. Like you should have the Lord's Supper. You should read from the Bible. You know, you should have confession and absolution. Like those are just biblical
Right.
things. Kind of beyond that, dude, let's just chill out. Like I don't know that we have to worry that much about other things. I don't know.
I tend to
Yeah.
agree. I tend to agree
Yeah.
with you. I think an invocation's cool because it helps us
Oh yeah.
remember our
Yeah.
baptism, right?
Yep.
And then,
Yep.
yeah, confession, absolution. And so let's agree on some sort of an ordo, and then not judge the music style, and trust that we're all trying to sing songs that point people to Jesus rather than self, and off we go. There's a lot of Christian freedom here. Hey, let's talk sports for a second. I think
Yeah, baby.
sports gives us an understanding. People's passion around sports gives us a deeper understanding of the liturgical rights. My team, my people. I'm watching the Denver Nuggets tonight. Like, I'm a huge Nuggets fan. Let's go. And I'm oriented
It's a
with a
good
whole
time to be
bunch
a
of
Nuggets
people.
fan.
It's a great time to be a Nuggets fan. We should get it this year. Anyway, so talk more about the religion of sports in our culture today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this is one of those places we see intuitional religion take place, but also where we see actually the importance of ritual. So of course, on the one hand, you can go back to probably a book you're familiar with, Tim, James K. Smith's Desiring the Kingdom, right? And he sort of is big on this idea of cultural liturgies, and that these are these sort of rhythms that habituate us and form us into particular kinds of people. And actually, one of the places he highlights in that book is sports, in the sports arena. And he actually argues that there's sort of a patriotic formation that happens. Like, it is interesting. We're kind of the only country that does like the national anthem before every, NFL game or whatever, right? Like, they don't do that in the Premier League. Yeah.
They don't do that in other countries. Like,
No.
like before soccer
Isn't that
games
weird?
and stuff.
Yeah.
They don't do their national anthem.
No, not that I've ever seen. Yeah.
That is interesting. Yeah.
Isn't that weird?
About?
But we do it.
What is that about? Like, it seems
Right.
normal.
And then we have
like
our
even before a high school game, it seems normal. Like, okay, yeah, it's kind of bizarre when you think about it. What does this have to do with our nation?
That's the thing. Isn't it weird? Like, but we're so used to it. And that's his point.
Yeah.
Like, we're so habituated to it that we're like, well, of course you do that. Why wouldn't you do that? And it's not bad. It's fine to do it, but it's just like, it's an interesting thing. Like, seriously, this will sound like a weird flex. I was just speaking in Korea a month ago, and I went to a high school volleyball game, and like, they did not do the Korean national anthem.
They just started.
They just started. You can just do that, as it turns out. So, yeah. But so there's a way in which we might say, actually, the arena ends up being a place that maybe shapes us towards sort of almost a patriotic type religion, which maybe that's another conversation. But there's another way in which I think sports give us, in an age of sort of intuitional religion, they give us what religion historically gave us, right? So Hubert Dreyfuss and Sean Dorrance Kelly, in their book, All Things Shining, they talk about this idea of the whoosh. And they say, like, that moment, and you've had this in sports stadiums, where it's like, when the big play happens and we all rise together as one, right? Like, that experience is a sort of, it's a religious type experience. And they're not Christians. They argue, like, this is where we should find meaning. Like, this is actually it. Like, it's the sort of, and not sports themselves, but the idea of the collective rallying around something like that. So you can also, it's somewhat similar, like at concerts. Like, I love going to concerts, and I was just at one where it was a hardcore show. I know you're a big fan of hardcore punk, Tim, and so it was.
I love it.
Yeah,
not really, but keep going. I got some concert stories though, so I'm gonna connect with you.
I'm excited. Yeah, you'll get it. So, but I'm at this like warehouse in Detroit, and it's like there's no stage. It's just the band and the crowd. And so it's like, I'll send you photos if you want. And and we're at this thing where it's like, it's all these, and it's mostly, let's be honest, like sweaty dudes in their late 30s, like myself. Okay, but we all we're singing along, and you like grab hold of dudes around you, and we all just have the mic, and we're all just like swinging, right? But it's like that sort of thing. And I think like people are like, that's where people are finding sort of religious expression in our world. And I think the question then for us is to say, what does it mean for the church? Not that we mimic these things. Like, the church should be church. Like, I don't want to go to church and think I'm at the mall or think I'm at a sports arena or whatever, right? Church should be church. And what does it mean to find the depth of meaning in the rituals of worship? What does it mean to find the depth, really, perhaps the main thing we can control, the depth of community within these spaces? And how do we lean into those places, to those relationships, so that it's like, yeah, I can go have this cool moment at a concert or a sporting event, and actually, I mean, this may be another conversation, Tim, see God at the bottom of all that he's actually the ground of all that in a sense, but then also recognize that I have a deeper community that I'm a part of. And this is actually pointing me to that deeper community and pointing me to those truer rituals that connect me with the God who is. I don't know if I actually answered what you asked about, but I just started rambling.
Yeah, my brain is going into so many. I want to talk about Christian nationalism. I want to talk about emotivism and the role of Sunday. Let's go there, and then maybe round back to the nation state and our rituals. What is it? What's acceptable? I don't know, acceptable. Define the terms for what do you think in Christian worship is acceptable and not leaning into or grounding people's identity in Christ, God's love for them through an experience. And this is where we kind of push back against the charismatic kind of movement too, because if the experience isn't there, I can't remember how many times I heard this at the seminary. This gets drilled into your brain. Like it's
Yeah,
not
yeah,
about
yeah.
the experience. It's you're very passive in this endeavor, and it's all about Christ coming to you. And yet when he comes to me and I passively receive him, that is an
Mhm.
experience. And I think a lot of us in the
Boom.
Lutheran circles, we're like missing sometimes because baptism, we were baptized as babies. And so one of those rituals for us, it just happened this last week in our confirmation service. And it was quite I wasn't dependent upon it, but like it was very emotional seeing a number of these families I've been with. It's seventh grade, are
Yeah.
confirming. And so I baptized a lot of these kids and have known these families now for 12, 13 years. And like I teared up praying over a handful of the kids, dude. And it was so coming
Yeah.
around the altar. What are some of those like rituals, those experiences that we need to cultivate in our communities? And we
Yeah.
sometimes maybe miss them or are scared of them and theologically justify why we don't do them. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I do think it's a major. That's too strong a statement. I am frustrated with the idea that I should not feel something in worship, or that like I shouldn't expect to, or that whatever. Like I get my faith is not based on my feelings. Absolutely. The truth of the gospel, the truth of my faith, the truth of Jesus is not based on my feelings. And I'll have a Sunday where it's the most boring thing in the entire world. And I'm the freaking preacher and it's still boring. You know what I mean? Like, and that's fine. God's still there. I don't need to feel something for God to be there. And dude, I don't know. St. Paul seems to talk this way in Ephesians 2, that we might experience the depth and the wonder of the love of God that is in Christ Jesus. That seems to be an experience across like Christian history, that people have had these profound, for lack of a better term, emotional experiences with God. And I think it's bizarre to pretend like that's not a thing, and that that's not a thing we shouldn't seek after and long for. Again, I shouldn't base my whole faith on that. The truth of the gospel doesn't depend on that. And man, I want God to meet me in the feels. I want to feel more when I worship than I do at a concert. And not that they're the same things, but I think it's okay to want that. It'd be weird to not want that. Why would I not want to feel a connection to God? Like that's weird. You should want to feel a connection to God. So I say that to say, like, I think one of the things like yeah, it's like the whole we have this sort of Luther's reaction to the enthusiasts of his day. We like just transport that on to any sort of emotion, and like that's just goofy. Like the enthusiasts were claiming to know more than the scriptures. Yeah, don't do that. But like the scriptures seem to indicate that we should feel things towards God and that we should expect to actually encounter him. So yeah, I guess I'd say
Well,
that. And I think like, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah. What is the fruit of the spirit? It's love. I want to experience love, the love of a father who runs to me and throws a party for me, even though I'm a rebellious prodigal son. Like that. That I tell the prodigal son story. Like, you want to get me emotional? Like, just get me going on telling the prodigal son, all the details and nuances of that, and I can be sad that I'm the older son from time to time. And so, yeah, that's amazing. And what's the second characteristic of the fruit of the spirit? It's joy, and we know that joy is the
Joy.
fuel for human connect, right? So, yeah, we've fallen off, man, too
Yep.
far
Yep.
away from talking. And what, like, our whole experience, we're not brains on a stick, we're emotive beings. You are
Yep.
what you feel and
You are what you
experience, and
love.
this leans,
Yep.
you are what you love, James K. Smith. So yeah, man, I don't know, I think we've missed something. And even if you're a staunch, you title yourself a staunch conservative traditional Lutheran worshiper, at the heart of that is you've had experiences in encountering God in that style of worship. That's why you love it.
Yep.
So
That's
why are
it,
we
dude.
afraid
That's
of talking
exactly
about
it.
emotion? Yeah.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. And it's like, and I think, and obviously, I don't want to fall into emotional manipulation, right? But it's like we set up a false dichotomy, I think, that says like it's either you got to be staunch or you're just this like running around with your hands in the air, dancing. Right? It's like, dude, no, there's actually like a whole breath between these two things. Yeah, and so it is. I do think this maybe speaks to a little bit of the tension I find myself, that maybe ties into some of what we've covered already. I find in myself in worship, and then just in the Christian life and in leadership, between what I guess I would call transcendence and immanence, right? Because there's a way in which, or we might say reverence and immanence, right? There's a way in which I do want worship to be reverent. Like we are worshiping God. Like we should Like, this is a big deal. He is holy. He's other. He's beyond us. Like, we should stand sort of in awe of him that way. And he is the God who comes to meet us. He is the God who draws near to us. He is the God who came to us in Jesus Christ, who like laughed and stubbed his toe and like, loved the little children. And so, I think about like our communion tables. This is like a pretty powerful ritual for us at my church. We commune around the altar. So people come up to the chancel and we all kind of circle around the altar. And then at the end, everyone holds hands and I do the back, so it's like, it's a pretty powerful moment. And it's just like, no matter what. It's cool because I have people who are kind of world renowned professors and we have homeless people, in the same circle. Like, this is a cool picture of the church, right? So you can't help but be sort of moved by that. But I wrestle with like, man, are we too irreverent at times there? Or are we leaning into this idea that God is imminent and he meets us in this moment? And how do we sit in that tension of recognizing sort of the awe and wonder of the God who is, and then also celebrating that he's a God who meets us in the midst of our muck and our mire and our goofiness? And so I think I don't know, for me, I'm finding if I just hold that tension, there's a lot of joy in that. If I let go of one side or the other of those, that's where I just get weird. Where it's like it becomes sloppy and actually I kind of lose the holiness and the otherness of God if it's too much about immanence. But if it's too much about reverence and transcendence, then God is like untouchable and so far removed from me that I actually lose the God who came to be with me.
I think
I don't know.
the
Does that
or
make sense?
yeah, it does. I think
Yeah.
the order then of our liturgy, our rituals, is what keeps the transcendence present. That I
Mm,
stand All Saints Sunday's coming up, right? And I stand with those who have gone before, who have practiced their faith in these ways. I say with the people of God for the last, gosh, 1800, 1700 years, right? In the Nicene Creed, like we've come up with these things that we say about God that form us, and yet there's still plenty of opportunity in the rituals and liturgy for levity, for the immanence of Christ for us, the accessibility of Christ. And I think the sacraments are like the height of that kind of mix between the transcendent and the immanent God who comes to us in his body and blood. So yeah, man, I think that's all really good. Anything I was gonna pivot to another topic. Is
yeah.
that good on that one? We're cool. All right.
That's good, man. Let's go. Yeah. Yeah.
So when I heard you speak in Michigan, you talked about connecting through hubs and nodes. You say, how do people connect who have no interest in the church? And you say, if we understood hubs and nodes, we'd do a better job in reaching those who are de-churched right now. So let's talk about that, Gabe.
Yeah. So, missiologically, there's this concept of cultural distance, right? So, the idea being, if Tim, you were sent to Iran to be a missionary, we might think, all right, what are the barriers to the gospel? Although incidentally, God's doing all sorts of stuff despite the barriers, but nevertheless, let's just, for the sake of argument, what are the barriers to the gospel for you going to Iran? I mean, it'd be things like language, right? That's me one. Culture, like you just got different. You're American, Westerner. It's a different sort of thing. Geopolitics, like Iran, like as a
We just bombed
country as a whole, as a state, does not care for the U.S. The U.S. otherwise, right? So like beef there. Okay, so you got these barriers, and so then you as the missionary, I mean, what's your job? Your job is to overcome the barriers to bring the gospel to people. We consider our sort of contemporary models of church in the West. What we say is, we say, hey, we want people to encounter Jesus, to hear the gospel, and so the way we do that is we invite them to church. What that means then is that person has to overcome all the cultural barriers. They have to be the one to go through the door. They have to learn church language. They have to meet people they don't know. They have to go to a space that's not comfortable for them in order to encounter the gospel, right? And so I think if we're actually to have a sort of missional mindset, we need to say, what does it mean for me to overcome the cultural barriers of my friends encountering Jesus? And so then this is where hubs and nodes comes in and a networked age comes in, where I think if we can understand ourselves as being part of different networks. So an example literally just happened. I just met with my discipleship group yesterday, and my buddy Jay was telling me the story of like, he went to a bachelor party and he met this dude who didn't know it all, but they started talking about the Lions. What can you do? And so Detroit Lions.
Sorry.
And so they're talking about Lions, and this guy at the end of the party says like, "Hey man, I don't have anyone in my life that I really can talk Lions with. Could you and I like just talk about them each week. I just need a friend to talk about the Lions with. My buddy Jay's like, sure. And so every Sunday for the last like 3 years, they talk on the phone about the Lions. This dude's not a Christian, nothing. Okay. Yeah, pretty right, crazy. And then you know, Charlie Kirk gets shot, what is about a month ago or whatever. And how everyone feels about it, whatever. Okay. The point is, this happens. It's sad, not a good thing. And so this guy who's friends with my buddy Jay is like, hey, man, this is like shaking some stuff up for me. I think I'm going to start going to church. I've never been to church before. And he goes, but like, you're the only Christian I know, and they don't live near each other. He's like, if I go to church, will you do a Bible study with me every week? And so every Monday morning, my buddy Jay does a Bible study with this guy. And so but what does he do? He did the cultural work, right? Like he meets him out in the world. He connects with him at this level of freaking Detroit Lions, right? They end up talking a little bit more shared politics, that sort of thing. And that leads to them having, this guy encountering the gospel, encountering the word of God. And so it's like a small snippet, but I think I look at my own city, 70% of people do not call themselves Christian. And of that 70%, the majority are not interested in going to church on Sunday. And so the point is, it doesn't matter how good I preach. Like I want to preach well. It doesn't matter how good our band is. And I want our band to be good. It doesn't matter how good our organ is. Like none of that actually matters, dude. They're not going to come. And so if I have any hope of connecting with them, it's that my buddies who play on a men's rec league for soccer see themselves as carrying the gospel in that network. And my buddies who are in the hardcore scene see themselves as carrying the gospel in that network, right? And that we see ourselves as part of these nodes and hubs in a greater networked age.
So that's so good. Is a node smaller than a hub? I don't really.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a node, I guess you're right. So I would say node I would think of as more like an individual,
Okay.
almost like an individual, maybe 2 or 3 people.
Yeah.
And then a hub is like a bigger community.
Smaller.
So again, it might be
small group.
Right. Like it'd be like, hey, there's 2 of us that go to the same CrossFit gym. So we're the node that's part of this hub. That's this gym. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and this is the call for marketplace missionaries, right? For people to see that they're being equipped. They come to worship, to be fueled, equipped, and sent to be missionaries right now. That missionary mindset has to be one of our main, and then leadership development toward that end, and leadership development and discipleship being pretty much 2 sides of the same coin. Do I have the character of Christ? Is my brain, I am growing in terms of my knowledge, my understanding of how God works in the world. And I'm finding that most especially through his written and revealed word. I need someone to talk about Jesus with. And then am I practicing as I'm talking with that person? Like a lot of times we make it discipleship way too complicated. I need another Christian. We're talking about practice, man. We're talking this Allen Iverson, right? I need someone to practice. We're talking about practice, not a game. Well, the game's coming, and the game is the game is out in the world, right? And someone who wants a reason for the hope that we have in Christ, and needs to see someone that's culturally aware, that's theologically hospitable, that looks for reasons to share the gospel with them, and not in a weird way, but in a very personal way. We're not even talking like street evangelists or anything. This is all relationship stuff. This is Greg Finke type stuff, meeting Jesus out, joining Jesus on his mission, right? It's very natural. But I think a lot of times, this is to get to the sports metaphor, if you as a church are not growing in terms of blocking and tackling football, right? If you can't block and tackle, you're not going to win many games. And blocking and tackling is hearing the story of Jesus and then becoming more winsome and bold in sharing that story as the Spirit opens the doors. Anything more to say there, Gabe?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I really appreciate you hitting it. Like, I think there's a certain intimidation people maybe feel about this. And I'm like, it really, I don't know if you said these exact words, but like, it's actually not that hard. It's not that complicated. And it's like, you don't even have to be weird. Like, it's just like, language I like to use is it's about intentional, not additional, right? Like it's not about additional, it's about intentional. It's just saying like, how am I entering into my world? And so, one of the things I'll talk about with my folks is like what I like to call breath prayers, right? So before I enter into a room, I'll just say like, God, show me where you're at work and show me what you want me to do. And I know whatever opens up, man. And maybe nothing that day. And that's it. But it's just like, it's saying that prayer, going in my rooms with intentionality and seeing what God does with that. And then it's crazy what he does. And it doesn't even have to feel like, I don't have to be like, here's this tract with the Roman road. Like, and maybe that works for some folks, but like, that's not my style. Yeah. So, yeah.
Well,
can I add something else? I think
please.
Okay, there's two levels too to the networks as far as nodes and hubs. So I went straight to like kind of the individual one. I think that's right, and because per our previous conversation, we're talking about this shift from a institutional age to a networked age, and so there's the personal way in which that plays out, and then there is, I think, the organizational structural ways in which we think of like how do we work better networked together as the church, right? And so, and that's where I think it's interesting, even within say like our same, Tim, you and I are part of the same church body, and so we're part of the same institution. But then what does it mean for us to be part of the same network? And how does that better adapt to, and that's not to the negation of the institution. It's not anti the institution. It's just saying like networks tend to reach networks better. We tend to be more fluid and adaptable. So how do we work as a network, even within the greater context of our institution? And I think that is where, not like stuff like the work you're doing. And I know you're just on Zach's podcast, like that sort of stuff, I think actually matters. Like that alone, not going to change the world. Enough of us like kind of walking together, like sharing best practices, figuring out how we can partner together for the sake of the gospel, raise up new leaders in the church, et cetera, et cetera. Like, I think that's what this age sort of calls for in a network sort of world.
Hmm. That's challenging to those who want to preserve things, not just institutions, but ways we've always done things. And so I think what we're becoming hopefully more adept at doing, and our gathering coming up in, I don't know when this is released, but January in Vegas, is a hope that we can do it better. That those of us who maybe more naturally move in a network, and those who maybe more naturally move, because a network is a little more voluntary, less structured for sure, but those who have become accustomed, and this is the true I guess test right now for any sort of denomination that is experiencing decline like ours is, are we going to look at one another as the enemy, or are we going to look at one another as a friend who has different gifts and different leanings but the same honest confession? And we need one another. We need our institutions. We need what has been preserved historically. We need the institution, most especially of the local church, but we also need more churches, and we need to think about discipleship and leadership development, and the things are changing. The world is definitely very different than when the LCMS started. And so this is just messy work, but it's necessary work. And this, I would say, it's a pivotal time for us right now. And maybe every generation kind of feels like that, but this is kind of our time, Gabe, for the sake of our kids and grandkids. If there's anything worth anything being preserved in the LCMS, we got to do some of this messy network work right now. And I'll shout out to networks and to cross networks. So I'll just mention
that's right.
Gottesdienst group, right? Okay,
Yeah,
we're brothers in
right.
Christ. Reach out and let's talk. I'd come on your stuff, you can come on this, and let's find those places of commonality, because there's way more that we agree on than we disagree on. And I just don't think we're talking across networks as well as I wish we were. So any thoughts there, Gabe? I know that's a little higher level, kind of, it gets into the politics and stuff of synod, but we just need to get better at this as a church.
Well, I think that's right. No, I mean, and I think that there's a certain Charles Taylor talks about this in A Secular Age. There's a fragilization that occurs in a secular age, meaning like it's a really long way to get at what I want to say, but like the fact that we have to justify our beliefs in our world, which we do, he says inherently fragilizes them. Meaning, again, 600 years ago, if I'm living in a village in France, like I don't have to justify being a Catholic. Like it just is, right? There's not really another option out there. Okay. But for all of us now in sort of the Western world we live in, we continually have to justify our beliefs, even to ourselves, to explain, like, it's like you asked me at the front end of this podcast, like, why is Christianity the true religion? Like, that wouldn't have been a question 600 years ago, right? But it is. And I have to find a way to justify that. And so there's a fragility that occurs as a result of that. And then what happens, I think, in a networked age is we say, like, hey, we can justify ourselves because we have this institution. And we've been able to say that for a long time. But as the institution begins to bleed, then we say, like, well, who are we if we don't have this institution? What does this mean if we're not the institution? And our belief becomes all the more fragile. So then what we have to do is cling really tightly to our tribes, even within that institution, right? I have to have these people. And the best way to form a tribe is to have another, like, it is just how we connect. And so I have to, like, I have to cling tightly to my network within the institution and the other people because of the inherent sort of fragility I find myself in. And it's super hard to break out of that. I mean, and I say that as a guy who finds it very hard to break out of it. Like I like you. There are people I don't like. And I don't want to. And Christ is like, yeah, but you gotta figure it out. You gotta love your enemies. You gotta love your brother in Christ who you profoundly disagree with. And I'm like, I'd rather not. I'd rather just be with the people I roll deep with, and we do our own thing, and everyone buzz off. And it's like, that's not right. Like the challenge comes again and again. Like, no, we got to find a way to love those who we may disagree with, but it's not easy.
Here's the thing, man. Every single time I have a conversation with someone who may have differences of opinion, two things happen. One, I can't hate face to face. I can't throw shade, and I gotta really govern my words, what I say about that person, because you can experience the pain of that person's face if you said something bad. Like we wouldn't talk about each other face to face like we do online. There's no way. So I learned something. I got to be sensitive, and then two, I find that I like the person, a lot more. Brian Wolfmueller is he's a friend, and he and I don't talk like all the time, but I'm trying to get closer to Brian, listening to stuff. And I think a lot of it's like really, really good stuff. We got members here at our church that have fallen in love with Lutheranism because of some of Brian's content. And then they come to our church and they're like, oh, this is amazing. So like he's a gift. He's a gift, and others in our church. I just don't understand those that we get into a political position. Pastors have way more freedom to talk than those that are in institutional positions. And then like they don't respond. If I've found something interesting that someone's written and I'd like to just have a conversation for the sake of our audience, I think they'd be blessed. But most often people that are in the institutional positions don't want to talk, partly because they vilified me in some of the positions we've taken. I'm the other. And if they talk to me, they may find out we agree on some stuff. And so I just don't get that necessarily. Do you get that? Well, why can't we talk to one another, Gabe?
Yeah. So part of I think fragilization, it then leads to, fragilization belief leads to purity spirals, right? So this is the whole, like, I don't know, like look up vegan YouTube, right? Like it's like you can't ever be quite pure enough. It's like, well, maybe I shouldn't pick on the vegans. Who can I pick on? Like, it's like you can have this in people who are very progressive or very conservative, for lack of a better term. Like you reach a point where it's like, well, you're not quite progressive enough. You offended actually this group and you didn't recognize that. And you end up on this, like, I am the most pure. I am and you just end up on this constant cycle in which the pool gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And I think, well, I mean, maybe I'll put it this way. I think some of the leaders of our institution are on a purity spiral and they don't want anything tainting the purity of this church body. And so then I'm just going to keep saying these things. Someone like you becomes a parasite within the purity, and it's a toxin that needs to be removed. It's not anything that needs to be dealt with. It's a toxin that needs to be removed and just sort of squished and pushed to the side. And I think because that's how purity cycles work. Like it's like you're tainting this thing. You got to get out. Which I don't know. Maybe that's too harsh a thing to say, and I'm not being as charitable as I should be. But I just think human beings tend to do this. Like we tend to make these like very close barriers, and anything that would contaminate it, we want to scrub and clean out rather than open up to consider what might be going on there.
I love the fact that the LCMS was created in the example of the church in Jerusalem in Acts 15. Do you know that that's like on the first page of our Constitution?
Is it really?
And yeah, and like the preamble and stuff, it's like under the example of how we work together in what happened in there. We're arguing about purity.
Yeah,
what does it
that's
take
right. That's right.
for them to get in? Circumcision. We're in a Galatians study right now. Like the Apostle Paul and the apostles in general, Peter's obvious sermon there in Acts 15. It's enough, man. What does it take for us? It's enough. Faith is enough. Faith in the finished work of Christ is enough. You're in. You're baptized. You've been claimed. If you put any Jesus plus this thing, whatever that thing is, that network, that allegiance, that even liturgical sign, if you put that, you've made what the gospel is into a law, right?
That's right.
And this exactly is like this is a staple of Lutheranism. It is Christian freedom. And I think we're we're struggling. We're going down a Pharisaical path that's not great, man. It's the early church battled with this, and we're battling with it today. And the only thing, the greatest of these is love. I'll tell you a higher truth. We talk about the metaphor. I'm bringing a Devo tomorrow for a football team on 1 Corinthians. We desperately need one another, better together, stronger together. This is the example in 1 Corinthians 12. And let me tell you an even better way. And it's the way of love. And then I love, this isn't a wedding verse, man. This is just a verse for the entire church. And the Corinthian church is jacked up. They got a lot of messy stuff going on. Let me tell you a higher way. Love is patient, kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It's not arrogant. It's not rude. It doesn't want to get its own way. Like this is the way of Jesus, and love will last. Faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. So if we've lost love, we're a clanging gong, a resounding cymbal. And if we're trying to justify ourselves as more of whatever, more Lutheran, more sacred, man, it is. And here's to get back to our closing comment. It is an awful witness to the world. It's an awful witness to the world.
Yeah.
So, and young people are observing this. How do they treat one another? The love that we have for brothers and sisters in Christ, even though we have differences of opinion around whatever, that's our best witness into the world. Look at how they love one another. Gabe, any response to all that, man?
That's right. No, I mean, I think that's totally right. And I think, and love is like, that's a problem, is like love is very, very hard though. It's like, it's so hard and it's such a hard call, right? Like, and it's not, man, it's not sexy and it's not like pithy and it's not like actual love. Frankly, we're not, doesn't actually go viral. I mean, you know what I mean? So there's a way in which I can, man, I may have a super solid relationship with a brother pastor who maybe views ministry differently than I do or worship differently than I do, whatever. And we may have this super great thing. And actually, and I do. And like, that's awesome. But it's like, that isn't what gets seen. What gets seen is like these sort of continual sort of arguments we have at sort of higher levels. And it's like, dude, how do we better love those who God has put in front of us? How do we like do one foot in front of the other and try and reach across wherever we can with those who are in front of us? So yeah, I mean, I think that's it. Yeah.
Let's go. Hey man, this has been fun.
Let's go, baby.
Every 6 months or so, I'm reaching out to you, and you're just a wonderful thought partner. And it's fun to talk about Jesus with you, and be praying for your book. And hopefully, so you don't need advice. You didn't ask for it. I got a book that's coming across the finish line. Here would be, like in everything, ask for a lot of help. Get a lot of readers early on who are kind of helping you refine and deepen the concepts. You're an excellent writer. The concepts are going to be wonderful, but we can always get better. I had a team of about 4 people who I wanted them to read from different kind of perspectives, and they really helped refine tone and keep me from being, I hope, as the book comes out, Confessing Jesus Mission, February 2nd, it's coming out. Pre-orders will be starting here soon. I hope that it's truth and love, and because I am the way I am, sometimes I tried to get most Lutheran snark out of it, and there may be a little bit, but not much. It really is just a prayer for our church body on ways we can grow and become more and more like Jesus. That's the heart of it. But a lot of people land that. A lot of people kind of spoke into that. So just get a lot of advisors to come alongside you, and also to encourage you. If you got a pulse, you need encouragement, and 2, to hold you accountable to getting it across the finish line. I wouldn't have finished my doctorate, nor would I have finished the book apart from people like, I don't want to, this isn't shame. This is just like godly encouragement and accountability. I don't want to let Dr. Trey Cox down, who is my first reader for my doctorate. And he's the man. He poured a lot of time into it. So it also served as kind of an engine to get the book across the finish line. Also, as you speak goals into existence, like I want to get it done by my 40th, set the plan. Who are you sharing that plan with and things. So hey bro, if I can support you at all, I'm all in. I definitely want to give you an endorsement once the book comes out, because you got a big brain and you're using it toward Jesus things. It's a beautiful thing. So hey,
I appreciate that, brother. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Yeah, man. If people want to connect with you, how can they do so?
Yeah, probably best way is, frankly, honestly, through my church. Like, you find our YouTube page, University Lutheran Chapel, Ann Arbor. My stuff's on there. I'm technically on socials. I do literally nothing at the moment. I know that'll probably have to change if I actually try to sell a book. But right now, you can find me on Twitter at Gabe Kasper 1, on Instagram at Gabe Kasper 1. I won't do anything, but if you want to, you can find me there. But really, any content I put out is coming through our church channel. So University Lutheran Chapel, Ann Arbor.
Do you know how much time I spend on social media? 0.
Yeah, how much?
I'm like ish. Maybe I post like 2 or 3 times a year if something cool is going on. My wife kind of posts and stuff, and that's like, we don't get in arguments about it, but I'm like, everybody knows.
Yeah.
How was a
Yeah,
vacation,
right,
man?
right,
You know,
right.
but so my wife,
Yeah,
my
yeah.
wife posts. I find doom scrolling to be like the worst habit. Well, there are a lot of worse habits
Yeah.
actually, but
Yeah.
one of the worst habits today. So anyhow, you won't find me much on socials as well. It sounds like we share that. Let's just be with
Yeah.
people, man. And I was
I love it.
overwhelmingly joyful that I got to be with you today. This is the Tim Ahlman podcast. Please like, subscribe, comment wherever it is you take these in. As you're on social media, probably taking in some of these, as the kids say, the short little bits. If there was anything soundbitey, you're probably going to find it on some of the socials as our team moves that out. But Gabe, you're a gift to the church and can't wait for our next conversation. It's a good day. Go make it a great day. Thanks so much, buddy.
Thanks, brother.